Thank you, Bev.
Thanks, Zach. So I really love this bringing up the floor, putting on the ceiling, and now here I am talking about incentives, how to reward early adopters. And just thinking back to 2015, in Pennsylvania, there were no certified passive house multifamily buildings. And through one incentive program, now there are at least 30 multifamilies that are affordable and over 1,000 units. In Massachusetts, in 2015, there was one building, the one that you see on the left here, the distillery, that was a multifamily passive house certified. And now we have 102 buildings, almost 8,000 units, I believe, that are thinking about certifying passive house. So they've at least done passive house energy modeling. So how have incentive programs in those two states made those big changes? And so the first one in Pennsylvania is one that doesn't cost money. And the one in Massachusetts does require some money to incentivize people to go to passive house. But we'll just quickly run through. So I think a lot of you are familiar with Pennsylvania's case. So in this case, affordable housing, it's very competitive to get low-income housing tax credits, which is how you provide the capital to build these new buildings. And so for perspective, I think in Massachusetts, there's about 7 projects for every one that gets funded. So it's very, very competitive. And how they choose is through this scoring ranking system that's called the QAP. You might have heard QAP talked about before. And so in 2015, Pennsylvania, pushed by Tim McDonald, who I think a lot of us know, put 10 bonus points in their QAP. So basically, if you came in with a passive design, you were automatically scoring a lot better than a lot of your peers. And it meant you were going to get funded earlier or maybe in that round. And through that, a number of series of those, they have funded over 30 affordable housing projects over 1,000 units. And the nice thing is the cost per square foot really didn't come in higher. And part of that's because you don't get extra money when you get low income housing tax credits. You have to bring it in. So it's not to say that there weren't any incremental costs. It's that they probably value engineered things out like finishes or maybe landscaping, but it was in a range that they were able to do that. And then we did see a bunch of other states add passive house to the scoring that helped design, pick the different scores. But in going back and looking at which states did that and how they did it, when they made it equivalent to LEED or enterprise green communities, you don't see any projects. So in 12 cases, states added passive house as like the same amount of points as LEED. And I think people are more familiar with LEED and it's not as hard. And so they go with that. They won't go to passive house. So it's only in the states where there was additional points in some way, shape or form. If you go to passive above LEED and there's a differential, that you see passive house projects in the affordable realm that's through low income housing tax credits get built. In Massachusetts, we were one of those states that did not have any incremental benefit as far as low income housing tax credits. We couldn't convince them in our state that it wasn't going to be too expensive. They were very concerned it would be 10%, 15% more expensive, which would mean that they couldn't build as many units. And so the agency that I work for, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and we're a quasi-governmental state agency, we said, well, what can we do? Like, we don't really think it's as expensive as they think. How can we get practitioners started doing this and getting knowledgeable in the state? Because we know early adoption does, the first time you do things, it's harder. And the costs are going to come down as you get more experience. And so we funded a $1.7 million program to reward affordable housing to go in to low-income housing tax credits with a passive design and to build to that standard. So it was up to $4,000 per unit, funded 8 projects, 540 units. And really the goal was to demonstrate that it's really not as expensive as people were thinking. And so here are some of the projects underway. Cambridge Finch, 1.4% incremental cost. And this one actually won FIAS Best Project, I think, last year, and Best Affordable Project. All of these so far are coming in below 3% incremental cost. And we are lucky. I think the Massachusetts stretch code is pretty high to begin with, and affordable housing in the state probably are better on average than most their starting point, because they're going to be a long-term owner. So maybe that's not going to hold for every kind of project in Massachusetts or in every state, but it is encouraging that it's this range, because on projects this size, that kind of premium, the site conditions or the land price or the labor or lumber prices might be as much that up or down. So 9 months after our agency put out this incentive program, the Mass Save program, which is the real big money in the state. So they're the ones who do all the efficiency programs across all the utilities. They seem to like the idea and sort of modeled after our program. And instead of it being $4,000 per unit, it's slightly less generous with $3,000 per unit, but it's for market rate and affordable. And one thing I really like is they picked up some of we did ours in several batches. There was pre-construction help, and then some at pre-certification, and then some at the final certification for the $4,000 we proposed. So they did something similar, and they're basically de-risking, trying to figure out whether you should go, convincing the design team whether they should go to passive house or not. So they fund 100% of a passive house feasibility study up to $5,000. 75% of passive house modeling costs up to $20,000. And then when you actually certify, you get $3,000 per unit. And another thing I like is if you don't actually hit passive, say at the very last minute, you have to value engineer out triple glazed windows or something happens, you still get double the new construction incentive that's based on like greenhouse or BTUs saved. And so this is like the hockey stick of adoption. So, almost nothing in the state to now we have over 102 projects signed up to at least do the passive house modeling. So we're not exactly sure how many of those will actually certify, but it's encouraging to even see them doing that modeling, because I think it adds something. They don't usually focus on airtightness to the same degree or thermal bridging. And so it sort of opens the eyes, I think, of the design team. And we're hoping that a big portion do go for it. So that's sort of our story of incentives. The Pennsylvania case doesn't cost anything. The Massachusetts case does. We hope to continue this program under Mass Save for a number of more years until this sort of becomes industry practice. And we definitely do see examples of where costs are coming down, and we're finding tricks and ways of approaching things so that it becomes less expensive. So I do think the incremental cost will come down later. And I will say, so some of these other approaches, the pulling up the floor, at the same time that these incentives have been offered, we've had some other things in the state that have been pushing at the same time that are probably part of the reason that we're having so much adoption so quickly. One of it's that larger projects in the state do trigger an environmental impact statement. And the Department of Energy Resources, which looks over those, has been really pushing folks who trigger that are doing multifamily to go to passive. So you have a little bit of a stick of bringing up the floor with that, then this incentive being provided. And then we were successful in getting 2 additional points above LEED in the last round of low-income housing tax credits. So 6 of the projects just awarded all went passive, which I think is about 2/3 of the new construction and affordable. So very encouraging. But I love all these ideas from different takes, and it's great to see them all coming together in some ways. Thanks.